going to go ahead and get started. I just want to take a few minutes up front to introduce Christine and some features that we're offering in this program. First and foremost, welcome to Studio B and your 30-day experience. I'd like to introduce Dr. Christine Keisinger. She is our Vice President of Development and lead trainer of conscious communications and emotional intelligence. In addition to help create our signature series, Christine creates and delivers advanced professional enhancement courses in the areas of interpersonal communication, conflict management, innovative leadership, group and team dynamics, as well as stress management, things we could all use nowadays. Today, Christine's going to present mindfulness and stress, and the follow-up to this presentation will happen in 2 weeks. In the meantime, we would invite you to browse our portal. We have an interview posted there now to your specific Cenlar portal page. It's going to be updated weekly. One interview that I'd like for you to say, keep an eye out for is an interview with Keith Bailey. He is considered an expert in customer service, and he did create a video especially for your Cenlar team. This week's session is going to be recorded, and it will be available to view by this Friday afternoon, and that's going to be uploaded to, again, the Cenlar portal with additional resources. And this is all going to be found in the courses tab. In addition to that, we will be offering live bonus 20-minute sessions for those of you looking for a more full experience. And the emails, I believe, have already gone out with dates and times with those, but we'll certainly keep you updated as we near the dates and times for those. The time slot for those is between 12 and 12:20, and that's Eastern Standard Time. During today's session, feel free to chat with me directly with any questions or comments that I can direct towards Christine. And we have a nice group here, so I anticipate that if you have any questions, maybe we'll have time at the end, or you can chat me directly. All right, so welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
So good to be here with all of you. Please, we've got a small group, so I really encourage you, if along the way you have any questions, chat them into Gretchen. She'll get them to me, and I'm very, very flexible here. So if there's anything that really captures your attention and you want to know more about it, or you need further explanation, please let me know. I think everyone would agree that lately, over the course of the last almost 5-6 months, it has felt like we are navigating very tricky terrain without a map. And we're not quite sure what our destination is. Or if this analogy works better for you, we are sailing very turbulent water that's uncharted. And we know that there's a shoreline, but we have no idea whether we're going in the right direction or not. And we don't know what we're going to find when we get there. I know that I've felt this way. So many people have felt this way. And it's not at all unusual because this is an unprecedented time. But I have a confession to make. If I am really honest with myself, I will tell you that I am grateful for the stress that has been associated with this period of uncertainty. And I've been grateful for the stress associated with this period of tumult and uncertainty because it has kicked me into action in a way that I am certain no other situation would have. It's increased my productivity, my creativity, just the energy with which I approach my work in a way that, looking at my life, was really necessary. Now, I also want to share that I wish that it wasn't a global pandemic that would have fueled my motivation over the course of the last 5 to 6 months. But that's what's happened. And here at Studio B, when we talk about stress, there's 3 things that we like to make clear right from the get-go. Not all stress is bad. And I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But not all stress is bad. Our goal in teaching in the realm of mindfulness is never to aim to eliminate stress. right from the start, we acknowledge that stress is a normal and natural part of life. I can be certain that upon waking up every morning, that there are going to be various stressors that come into my life. But the question isn't, how do I eliminate stress? For our purposes, the question is, how do I build the inner resources so that I can more skillfully step up and meet the stress that inevitably is going to be part of my day? And the third thing, and this is something that I've really been thinking about over the course of the last 5 months, and I'm not sure that I've ever really thought about it before, is that when stress is present, especially if it's very chronic and very acute, it's often an alarm system of sorts that tells us, pay attention, pay attention. Come back to yourself, come back to your body, come back to your emotions, come back to your relationships, come back to some aspect of your work that might be needing attention. And when stress expresses itself to that degree that it really kind of shakes me up and gets my attention, it's usually because there's something really important that I need to know. So I'm going to bring my slides up and let's look at what it means and how it feels to meet stress mindfully, because that's what today's session is about. So let's do a little bit of truth telling about stress. As I said, and I like to always start here when I talk about stress, stress can be positive. If you really want an inner glimpse, even a transformational view of stress that will just really sort of flip it upside down for you, I really encourage you to look at the work of Dr. Kelly McGonigal. In 2015, she did a TED Talk that went viral. And the title of the TED Talk was How to Make Stress Your Friend. And this talk is full of research that indicates this really important fact about the positivity of stress. And that is that stress can motivate us, can fuel us. It can prepare us to take very productive, very purposeful action. And sometimes the stress that I feel isn't stress at all. It might be excitement. For example, before I come on to do anything like this, or if I were to address a crowd live, I have physical sensations that are almost identically similar to stress. The difference is I'm grateful for those sensations because I know that I can take them, and if I channel them the right way, it can fuel my presentation with a level of passion, energy, excitement that would be very different if I didn't feel those things. In fact, I would worry if I didn't feel a little keyed up before a presentation. But where Kelly McGonigal's work is really important is that she proves, this is evidence-based, scientifically, she has proven that the way that we think about stress, what we believe about it, actually shapes how it shows up in our body, how it impacts our cognitive functioning, how it impacts our emotions, our relationships, our productivity, and our work life. In other words, what is the story that you carry about stress? Stress has a really bad rap in our culture. So what is the narrative that you carry, and what would it mean and how would it feel if you were to just sort of play around with this notion that perhaps stress serves me in a productive and purposeful way? And to think about times in your life where stress kicked you into action in a way that was really necessary and really took you to an entirely different level of living, communicating, relating. Now, that said, it's really important that we watch for what I call acute situational stress, because that happens too. There's some sort of emergency that comes up, and we don't have positive feelings about it, right? It's very acute, It's very situational and it's very time bound. It might feel stressful for a certain period of time. And then we recover. And then there is chronic, ongoing stress, which is not time bound. And that's what many of us are feeling right now. And this is where stress becomes detrimental to our physical, cognitive, emotional, relational, and professional lives. This is when we are in the stress response, fight, flight, freeze, shutdown mode for days, for weeks, for months. And many of us are there. And we are beginning to feel the impact. And so my purposes for today, my goal today, is to have you just sort of thinking about these different ways of thinking about stress and really assessing the degree to which the stress we find ourselves in that might feel very chronic for you, related to the situation we find ourselves in, and how this ongoing threat might be eroding or might be impacting your physical, relational, emotional lives, professional lives in ways that are less than ideal. One of the things I want to do today is to talk with you a little bit about the very unique expression of stress as it's related to crisis, because that's a different kind of stress, which brings me to this notion of threat. So in my lifetime, I've never experienced a global pandemic. In my lifetime, I've never experienced this degree of social and civil unrest, which is why it feels like the water is uncharted and turbulent, and why it feels like I don't have a map and I'm trying to navigate a way forward. So threat is real and present. Sometimes when we can name the nature of the threat, just naming it can help us to diminish the severity of it that we feel. So what's been threatened? Right from the start, March 19th was the last day that I led a live training. And for me, that was the first day of the shutdown in my own life. All afraid of our physical health being compromised and the health and well-being of those that we love and care about. For many of us, the notion of family got really reconfigured, especially for families who all of a sudden were living together 24/7, all of the time, parents at home working and simultaneously trying to manage children who were trying to get their schoolwork done. The turbulence that created in many of our family systems is a webinar in and of itself. But we had to learn to do family a little bit differently, and that can feel threatening. Many of us, this is happening now, I'd add this as a new threat that many of us are currently feeling, not only in our personal lives, but in the media, is what's going to happen to our kids in the fall related to school, and everything that we have to juggle when we don't know. We are in such uncertainty about our children's education, which feels threatened at so many different levels. Many of us have experienced financial threat. Many of us have experienced what feels like threat to our own professional stability. We might still be working, but we're working very differently. Or there are a lot of people who aren't working at all. So where do I stand professionally? And then, of course, many of us are feeling threat globally, threat to our nation, threat to this planet. That's a lot. Any one of these things is a lot. But when all of these things are simultaneously threatened, that is when we come into the potential for chronic, ongoing stress that is not bound by time. I would be remiss if I did not mention that another layer of this is loss. And the reason that I mention this is because loss is depleting to our system. It's necessary to feel and experience. It's part of what it means to be human. but it can be really stressful. And there are a multitude of losses that are happening right now. And I like to include this slide because there are many people who might be feeling like, I sort of have a grip over things at this point. We're at 5-6 months in, but I still don't feel myself. And I'll often ask, have you considered loss? Are we aware of the multitude of losses that we're experiencing and that we might not even be aware of? There's defined loss, the loss of a job, the loss of income, the loss of life, the loss of our health, the loss of access to the places that we want to go, right? Very overt. We can point to all of those losses, we can name them. And then there's something really interesting called limbo loss. This is an actual term for the experience of not knowing whether you've lost or not. It's that waiting period. For example, you have some of the symptoms that are associated with COVID and you take a test and you learn that your results are not going to come through for another week or more. Limbo loss is that agonizing period of time where you don't yet have the answer. When some people talk about limbo loss and write about limbo loss, they often say that it is a loss that is actually more difficult to manage than a defined loss. Anticipatory loss is, I know I'm going to lose, it just hasn't happened yet. An example of anticipatory loss would be moving. Maybe you and your family are moving in September. So that's a few months away, but it's a loss that you're beginning to anticipate. And there is stress that is attached to that. Or maybe that the job you're currently in or the job you're currently doing is going to change or is going to end in a couple of months. Again, that's a loss. But I think that the most important loss that's here on the screen that's been enormously stressful but not named for so many of us is what we call morning dreams. And that are the losses that are related to things like, I always held this vision as a parent of watching my child walk across the stage, receiving his or her high school diploma. And that didn't happen in quite the way we imagined. Or college graduation, or I had to cancel our daughter's wedding, or we were supposed to go on this fantastic European vacation that we've been saving years for, and that's been canceled. It's sort of like all of the dreams that we have held that can't come true, that can't be made manifest because of this unexpected, uncertain time that we find ourselves in. It's really important as a leader, as anyone who manages, to have these losses on your radar because they not only affect your life, my life, they also affect the lives of those we lead. So if you have a team member who's just off and maybe doesn't know why, doesn't know what to call this off feeling, it very well could be associated with a myriad of losses that are right here on this screen. So there's a lot. There is a lot. There is the stress of the uncertainty, the fear, the overwhelm, and then there are the losses. So stress expresses itself for each of us very uniquely. I always say that we have our own stress signature. There are very common and general ways that stress expresses itself. But the way stress expresses through you is as unique to you as your own thumbprint. Why is this important? This is important because the clearer, more aware, more mindful that I can be about the sensation of stress as it lives in my body, as it's expressed in my body, in my cognition, in my emotions, in my relationships, the more I can be aware of that unique expression, the quicker I realize I'm in stress response. I need to do something about it. I need to make a choice about how I'm going to meet with this, how I'm going to respond to it. So I want to spend just a little bit of time just putting some things on your radar, because when we are in crisis, global crisis, stress is expressing itself in very unique ways. Physical body, you might be noticing insomnia or disrupted sleep. You get to sleep, but you're waking at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and the mind is like a runaway train, fraught with worries. Some of us are having vivid, crazy, wild dreams. That dream state, that kind of dreaming that can happen during crisis, is really your own mind's way of managing all of the overwhelm of the many, many, many things you're dealing with and thinking about. Changes in the way that you're eating, overeating, undereating, extreme exhaustion. And I don't mean ordinary exhaustion here. I mean extreme exhaustion. That there have been times over the course of the last 5 months when I've had 20 minutes during the afternoon and I laid on my couch and fell into the deepest sleep, comatose-like sleep. That is sheer exhaustion. These are manifestations of stress that can occur in the physical body when stress is related to crisis. Cognitive functioning, brain fog. Remembering, brain fog is not just forgetting where you put the car keys. Brain fog is, I don't know where I put the car keys. I'm tearing the house apart looking for the car keys, and they're in my hand. Or I can't find my sunglasses, and they're on top of my head. Brain fog is, I see you over Zoom, I know you, and I can't reach into the file in my brain to find your name. Intrusive thinking is often a symptom of crisis-related stress. And the way that I describe this is when, despite all of your efforts, you have a song, not even a song that you like, that is running through your mind on repeat, and you don't quite understand why it's there or how to get rid of it. Intrusive thinking is often catastrophic thinking, that there's not any evidence that catastrophe is in your future, and yet you're imagining catastrophe. The next one's really important, what we call tunnel or myopic vision. We tend to go into tunnel vision when we are stressed because we have to. Think about an incredibly acute stress moment where you had to move quickly, act decisively. You had to put one foot in front of the other in order to move forward. It's all you could see was the one foot in front of the other. That's important, but not in a chronic way, especially as a leader, because it completely wipes out the bigger picture. Myopic vision. Listen, myopic vision occurs when I lack imagination, when I lack insight, when I lack clear foresight. When my brain is in stress response, I lack a clear pathway to the part of my brain that can create, innovate, think out of the box. I lacked a clear pathway to the prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO suite of my brain, executive function suite. So it's really important that we're aware that when we're feeling that brain fog, that tunnel vision, I'm in stress response, which often leads to fear-based, rash decision-making, which is not helpful now, especially in our professional lives. We don't want any decisions made out of fear. They'll likely be the wrong decisions or misguided decisions. And then again, this is really important, lack of access to all of my brain, to all of it, to the hippocampus. That's the part of my brain where memory lives, because when I need to solve a problem, when I need to do things differently, when I need to reimagine my business or the way that I do my work or the way that I lead, I need to call upon memory to do that. Lack of access to the prefrontal cortex. as an executive, I might need to make executive decisions. So I need that part of my brain. And then lack of access to the right side of the brain, where creativity is thought to live and thrive. And more important, lack of access to the white matter of the brain. And that is the part of the brain that allows me to jump from various hemispheres of the brain, from the two hemispheres of the brain and other parts of the brain, so that I can operate at an optimal level, even in the face of crisis. Emotionally, we might be feeling anxiety and depression. We might be feeling very erratic in our emotions. We might be feeling very reactive, highly irritated, agitated, frustrated, or I just don't feel myself, and I haven't felt myself in a long time. All normal manifestations of stress turn up the volume on all of these things when we are in crisis. You might also find stress expressing relationally. That's its own webinar. Really important, though, to know that if your relationships are feeling a little turbulent right now, it might be because your stress and the stress of those around you is spilling over and into those relationships. And of course, impact on your professional functioning. I like to think about these as what I call the 3 E's. My energy's low. My energy's low for my work. My engagement just isn't there. I don't feel as connected to the work that I do, and I don't feel as connected to others that I work with. And my effectiveness is suffering. If you've got low energy and you're feeling a lack of connection or engagement with the work that you do and your colleagues, it's going to affect your effectiveness. These 3 E's, when they exist together, are the definition of burnout. And so many of us, because we've got so many balls in the air, are experiencing burnout right now. I want to give you a quick model that you can work with that was a real game changer for me. This comes out of the work of a man named Dr. David Rock. He's a neuroscientist who also studies leadership. He's very, very interested in a lot of different things related to leadership, but mostly the role that the mind and the brain play in leadership. And his work in neuroscience and most of his protocols and his recommendations are all mindfully based. All of this is about mindfulness, putting these things on your radar so that you might be more mindful of the nature of the stress that is present, how it's expressing itself in you, and now why. What is the neuroscience of triggers? So I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version of Dr. David Rock's work by introducing you very quickly to the SCARF model. You can use this model to very, very quickly assess for yourself why it is you're feeling triggered in the first place, why you're feeling anxious, why you're feeling like you want to strangle your colleague, why you're feeling like you're about to just blow it. So when we think about SCARF, we want to think about those times when we feel really reactive, despite the fact that we might have a mindfulness practice, or despite the fact that we think we're an emotionally intelligent person who practices conscious communication. There are certain things that at a fundamental level trigger us as human beings. So here's what the acronym stands for. And this is how I used this when I first learned about it. I wrote it down on a recipe card, a cue card, and I carried it around with me for 30 days. And every time I felt triggered, I took the card out and I ran myself through SCARF, and I was very quickly able to figure out what it was that triggered me in the first place. And even better, when you're in the presence of someone who's triggered, colleague, your leader, your spouse, your child. You can run yourself through SCARF and you can figure out what's triggering them, and then you can meet them there. In other words, you become very adept at skillfully, mindfully meeting someone who's really, really hot in this moment, really reactive. S stands for status. I wish there was a different letter for this, because I think that the word status is misleading, because it's so much deeper than that. But essentially, the question that we're asking when we feel really threatened in terms of status is, where do I stand? Where do I stand in this organization during a global pandemic? Do I still fit in here? Is my job going to change? Am I going to be asked to do different things? Am I going to be valued in the same way? Where do I stand? And it really speaks to our fundamental need as a human being to know, this is where I stand. This is how I belong. This is how I fit in. When I have those things, when I'm questioning those things, you can believe that I'm going to be triggered in some way if I don't have awareness of that. C, certainty. We thrive in certainty. This is why we're told infants and toddlers thrive on routine. We're really no different. We need it to different degrees because we are different as human beings, but for the most part, we want to know what's happening, what's coming next. We like predictability. We like stability. We want to know. Just think about this. S and C are already threatened in a global pandemic. We don't quite know how we fit into this new life anymore. We are not certain about anything. Autonomy. This is an important one. All human beings, and we see this in infants and toddlers, we see them fighting for their independence. We see them staking their claim in their own autonomy, especially as they're moving from going out of your arms into crawling, crawling to walking, walking to running, almost always moving away from you. And then they're preteens and teens and they're slamming the door and they're locking themselves in their room. This is the human expression of autonomy. What does this have to do with the workplace? I will help you to reach your potential as a leader. I will inspire you to work at a high level if I never forget that what you need is autonomy. You need to have a sense that I trust you to make good decisions for this company. You need to know that I'm not micromanaging you, that you have some independence. That's exemplary leadership, by the way. In our current lives, our autonomy has been really stifled. I can't get in my car necessarily and go have dinner at my favorite restaurant. I can't walk into the grocery store without taking certain precautions, right? Autonomy is threatened at a lot of different levels right now. Perhaps I'm being asked to do a different kind of job right now, maybe working with a new team. And so something that I was working on independently, I'm not anymore. That can be really triggering. It's interesting that R comes next because it's counter to independence, and that is our strong human need for relationship and the way in which our relationships have been affected, threatened. Those of us who are living alone or might be living apart from people we really love, and maybe we haven't even seen them in 5 months. Those of us who are living all together 24/7 and are really finding it difficult to have that much togetherness can feel a threat to a relationship. We're reading about marriages being threatened right now because of what's happening and just the reconfiguration of how we have to live our lives. And many of us, especially as we're thinking about perhaps transitioning ourselves into the workplace in a very new and different way, wow, we can't relate to each other in the workplace anymore like we once did. A friend of mine was sharing how devastating it's felt that although they're back in their workplace, one of the really important aspects of their culture was their shared lunchtime. They all brought food in, and they had a kitchen there, and they would prepare the food and they would eat at a communal table, and they can't do that anymore. And that's just a small example of how relationship can be threatened within an organization and have an impact on the organization. The last one might be the most important. They're all important. The F stands for fairness. But what we want to think about when we're thinking about fairness is we want to think about how deeply it is that we as human beings value having our own dignity respected by others. So whenever I believe that I'm being treated unfairly, or my colleague is being treated unfairly, or my child is being treated unfairly, that their dignity is not being honored, I will get triggered. Whenever I feel that my own dignity is not being honored, there's a strong possibility for me to feel triggered. The reason that I share this with you is because it can help you to understand those moments when you've gone from 0 to 100 real quickly, and you don't quite understand why. I guarantee you that if you stop and look back at those moments, you would be able to see, yeah, my certainty was really triggered in that moment. My autonomy, I felt like, you were taking the car keys away. It didn't feel that I was being treated fairly. Here's the thing. Any one of these things, if we feel they're threatened, we're going to feel triggered. Then we have a decision to make. How am I going to respond to that? When more than one of these things is triggered, our reactivity, we turn the volume up. When all 5 of these things are triggered, we have a very high probability of triggering, of reactivity. The global pandemic has activated the trigger of all of these things. We don't quite know where we stand. Doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of certainty. Our independence is limited. Our relationships have been compromised in some way, for some of us. And gosh, there's a lot of people out there who don't feel like this is fair. Why is this happening? This doesn't feel quite fair. So I encourage you to use SCARF. Memorize it. Carry it around with you like I did. Use it for 30 days. The next time you're in the presence of someone who seems highly triggered and reactive, just sort of run yourself through it. Wow, I think right now my 16-year-old's autonomy is really being triggered because she can't grab the car keys and go for a drive. Or she feels really triggered because she has to stay at home all day with all of us, and she's been cut off from her friends. Any number of things. That's just an example. When you're working with a colleague who seems triggered, or you're leading a team or individuals who seem triggered, just step back a little bit and run the situation through SCARF, and then see, how can I respond to the need here? The need for status, the need for certainty, the need for autonomy, the need for relationship, the need for fairness. How can I respond to those needs in a way that's going to make them feel a little more comforted? And of course, use it on yourself and start there. Because now we move into the mindful part. Part of mindfulness, a big part of mindfulness, is the awareness piece. I'm aware. This is acute situational stress that's time-bound. This is chronic, ongoing stress, and I don't know when it's going to be over. Or this isn't stress at all. This is excitement. Assess. See how it's manifesting in your body. Let your body communicate with you about whether you're in that stress state. And then choose. There are two pretty quick neurological responses. One of two neurological responses tends to kick in when we're feeling highly stressed. The first is one that we all know about, stress response, which is moderated by cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol kicks in when I feel threatened. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to run. I'm ready to freeze or shut down. Grateful that the body can do this, because as you know, there are critical moments when you need the cortisol and the adrenaline because you've got to act fast. You've got to fight, you've got to run, or you've got to play dead, freeze and shut down. And then there is this other stress response that we don't necessarily name, but we all do it. And that's what we call the pleasure reward response. And that is, you're in a difficult situation. You're feeling the discomfort of stress or overwhelm, and you just want it to go away. And so you seek some kind of pleasure or reward in order to mitigate what you're feeling. And that particular response is moderated by dopamine. And when dopamine kicks in, we feel good. We feel like comforted, like a warm blanket tightly around us. The problem is the dopamine doesn't last very long. And when it wears off, we're back to the discomfort again. So you want to think about that every time you find yourself, you swear you're going to bed at 10 p.m. and it's 1 a.m. and you are still watching Ozark on Netflix. Or you're done with the ice cream, and yet you find yourself going to the refrigerator for the ice cream or the comfort food or whatever it is for that support. Stress response, pleasure reward, we all do it. It's so common, but we're not meant to do it in a chronic way. Both of those responses will drain the system, deplete the system, potentially make us sick, and definitely compromise immunity. But then there's this alternative response. And it has a name that I'm not that crazy about because people hear it and I can tell they're not so crazy about it, but there's a reason for it. And it comes from the work of Dr. Shelley Taylor at the University of California, Berkeley. And she named it the tend and befriend response. You see, stress response, pleasure reward, kicks in pretty automatically. We're not even aware of it, and we're at the refrigerator. We're not even aware of it, and I'm fighting with you, or I'm running from you, or I'm here, but I've left the room because I've completely shut down, or I'm in the refrigerator, right? But if the awareness of the stress being present is there, there's a third response that's neurologically based, but I have to choose it. It doesn't happen naturally unless I practice my way into it. Tend and befriend is moderated by the hormone oxytocin, and it happens when I stop. I say, all right, stress is here. I'm sort of feeling triggered and reactive. I'm going to make a choice here. I'm going to acknowledge that it's here, and I'm going to tend to it. And I'm going to tend to it in a way that's kind. It's sort of like watching a child fall from a bike, who's learning how to ride a bike and skinning her knee. And as an adult, we run to that child. We don't run away from the child. We don't fight with the child. We don't run to the refrigerator. We run to the child and we tend to the discomfort in a kind way. When we do that, and when we do that for ourselves, we begin to generate this magical hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is good for everyone. It is a neurohormone. It affects our biology, our chemistry, our physiology, and our neurology. It's interesting that during stress response, when the cortisol is here, I'm ready to go, and the adrenaline is here, I've got the energy to manage this moment that's really acute and needs me, oxytocin is present too. because oxytocin is that part of you that knows that in an emergency, yeah, I can run, yeah, I can fight, yeah, I can freeze and shut down, and yes, I can reach out to another person because I need the support. Oxytocin primes us neurologically and physiologically for support and connection. It helps us to feel protected and supported. So what if there's no one around? I can generate oxytocin myself by tending to my stress in a kind way. What's great about oxytocin and what's great about Tend Befriend is it will never ever drain your system. It actually helps to restore and re-energize. It actually helps to nourish and nurture your system. It's good for everyone. It's good for you. And when you're good, everyone around you is better. So before I lead us into today's meditation to take us out of today's session, I just want to give you the inner monologue that's going to support what I call a mindful response to stress. And here's what it might sound like. All right, stress is here. I acknowledge it. That's awareness. I'm going to be really open to my options about how I'm going to respond to this. That's called choice. I'm going to remain connected to myself. I'm going to remain connected to myself because I can trust in me and my resources to make the best decision possible. I'm going to have full access to my brain. And if the stress involves another person or other people, I'm going to stay connected. I might want to fight you. I might want to run away from you. I might want to shut this down. But I'm going to remain calm enough to stay connected. If you forget everything that I shared here today, remember two things. Very, very early on, when the global pandemic set in, this was probably March 20th, I read an interesting article in the New York Times, and it was written by a psychotherapist who said, there are two things that human beings need right now more than anything else across the globe. They need to feel safe, and they need to feel connected. If I can walk myself through a monologue like this and shift out of stress response into, this is how I tend to what's happening in a friendly way, then I know that for this moment, I'm safe. And in this moment, I'm connected to myself, and I'm going to stay connected to others if others are involved. So, I want to take you into a mindfulness experience. And the way that we think about mindfulness for our purposes here today is that it is an ancient solution for our contemporary discomfort and suffering. It has a history of 2,600 years. And in your next webinar in 2 weeks, Jen will talk a little bit more about that. But I want to just guide you into an experience where I want you to have the sense of feeling calm and settled within yourself, feeling your own strength, that you are connected always to your inner resources. You are resourced, and you're going to be increasingly resourced when we get through with you. And that you have the capacity always to remain connected to yourself and to connected to each other. This practice comes from a body of work called embodied leadership. And I want to just point two things out to you before we begin. The most important is that your body is a central aspect of this practice. You need your body to do this. And I want you to remember something. The body and the breath are always right now. Your body doesn't exist as the past. It doesn't exist as the future. It always exists now, and so does your breath. So whenever you need to fast track yourself into present time, into now, into where you are now, you come to the body and you come to your breath. So if this whole webinar were to just shut down right now, that's what I would want to leave you with today, is that you have with you 24/7 your body and your breath. Both are always in right now. So I want to invite you to get comfortable. And if you would like to turn your cameras off, please do that. And if you're seated, you can even take this standing if you'd like, but I'm imagining that most of you are seated. And if you turn your camera off and you even want to come into a laying down position, that's fine as well. So let's just sort of settle, and we're going to settle by bringing the feet hip width apart and just allowing them to rest against the floor. We're going to settle by getting a little bit taller in the spine and simultaneously allowing the muscles in your back to rest and relax around your spine. And I want to invite you to close your eyes. That's always an invitation. You can keep them open, but if they're open, keep them focused center and down, and keep your gaze really soft so that the eye muscles are relaxed. And we're just going to begin with 3 very intentional breaths. So I want you to take a very deep breath in, and as you exhale, allow the jaw to relax. And take another deep breath in, and as you exhale, allow the shoulders to relax. And take another deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel your entire body sinking into your seat or the floor if you're standing. And then just allow the breath to just be just as it is as you draw your attention down to your feet. Just noticing these feet against the floor. Maybe noticing the weight of your own feet. The way that the feet have a capacity to ground you. They are a reminder of your strength, how you always have stood on your own 2 feet. And now taking your awareness to that spine. And just for a few moments, really connect to your own dignity and how important your dignity is for you. And the calm that's associated when we feel relaxed in our own dignity, in our own self-respect. And then finally, taking the awareness to your shoulders, maybe letting them drop just a little bit more, and then opening them up by bringing them back. And take the awareness to your heart or center chest, and just feel how expanded the space feels when you drop the shoulders and bring them back. Just taking the next few moments to notice how you feel right now. And having spent a little bit of time at the feet And then visiting the dignity of your own spine, and then the openness of your heart, and how the breath might be flowing a little more freely right now. Calm through the dignity of the spine, strong through these feet, open to staying connected to yourself and to others. Maybe just notice the sensation of your breath for just these few final moments. And cultivating this awareness. This time is for you. Consulting with yourself as to when you want to open your eyes. And do that when it feels right. Letting the light back in. We call this a centering practice. It's something that you can do in a matter of, we probably were in this experience for 3 to 5 minutes. It's one of my favorite practices because I can shift into it very quickly. I can be around a boardroom table and start to feel triggered by something that someone said or something I think is going to happen, and very quickly ground through my feet, get a little taller in my spine, drop my shoulders down and back, and it reminds me, bringing us full circle now, it reminds me that in any moment, it doesn't matter what the stressor is, that I have the capacity to connect to my own strength through my feet, that I have the capacity and the right to feel a sense of my own dignity, and that I'm always better if I act to maintain a connection to those around me, and most of all to myself. 3 small shifts that have a dramatic impact neurochemically, hormonally, emotionally, cognitively. So, next time we see you, when Jen is here, I have the ship here in rocky water because she is going to teach you what it means to anchor. Because what if I'm sailing that ship? What if I'm in charge of navigating that boat through that water? And I've got a whole lot of people that are counting on me. I need to learn how to anchor so that I can best serve others. So you'll have that to look forward to. So our time is over. I went over by 1 minute, but if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
Do you have any tips for novice in mindfulness? It takes a long time to teach yourself how to properly meditate and make sure that your mind is clear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this from my own experience. It took a long time to figure out how to meditate and actually be in the moment. So it's not going to happen, obviously, when we teach someone to do it, it's not going to happen from the first time. Yeah. What is your tips for someone who is just doing it for the first time? They may not experience what you expect them to experience, is my point.
Yes, and what's really important about that is that whatever they experienced was perfect for them. And their awareness of, oh my gosh, during that experience, I wanted to jump out of my skin. That's a mindful moment. Or during that experience, I nearly fell asleep. That's a mindful moment. Or during that experience, her voice drives me crazy. It reminds me of this person and I can't listen to, like, any number of things that are going on in the mind. The awareness of that is mindfulness. And so we try to be very, very clear about how important it is that any sort of experience that we offer, anything that we might guide you through, that we completely drop any sort of judgment about it. We want to try to not strive in it. We want to try to be at peace with, okay with, however it was for us. How was that experience for you?
I have done this before, but I have to tell you that my first experience with mindfulness was not,
Yeah.
I don't think I gained anything from it. It takes practice.
Yes. And that's why we call it a practice.
Mm-hmm.
I refer to my mindfulness, my meditation time as my practice for over 30 years now. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like I've gone to nirvana, and sometimes I feel like I'm fighting with it. And, it's different every day. It's different. If I meditate twice per day, it's going to feel and be experienced very differently depending on any number of things. Jen, did you want to share any wisdom on
that? Elena, is that how I pronounce your name?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's definitely not an easy practice. It is very simple. And I think that's where people just, especially beginners, assume that the simplicity equals ease. And that's not true, right? So exactly what Christine said, even after a long time, consistent daily practice for me, I'll have moments. Just yesterday, I just got a Peloton and I went for a ride, and it's hard and my heart rate was crazy. And I went right from the Peloton up to my meditation cushion, and my heart rate was like completely out of control. And I was starting to feel really anxious about that. And I stopped my practice, which was really a wild, I haven't had to do that in quite some time. So, but it just proves that not every time you come to your cushion or you take your seat or stand and pause and connect to your body or your breath, are you going to have spaciousness in the mind or a calm mind? Mm-hmm. What you might notice is that there's anxiety present in the body, or the mind feels like a circus, that you're just going through your to-do list. And what we teach, and what I'll talk about in the next session, is the neuroscience of why that is really important. Those experiences are really important to have, especially for beginners. And there is a method to kind of going down a path of mindfulness that doesn't feel, as a practice, that doesn't feel completely overwhelming, that you have a lot of tools to lean into so that you have choices to make on what might be most appropriate for you in this moment, or, later on today when you sit to kind of settle down. And that's where teachers come in. It's really helpful, especially in the beginning, to have resources that you could lean into. And what I would just recommend, my best advice, is to just take 2 to 3 minutes in the beginning and just feel your feet against the floor, drop into your physical body, just like Christine led you through. Because sometimes the breath could be tricky. And we'll just build on something that feels supportive in the beginning, and we work with that, and we get curious about it, and then willingness comes into play at some point. But it's a different experience for every student that gives it a try.
I just don't want I don't want to lose anyone at this first try, because the first try may not necessarily give you the belief or the connection you're looking for, and that awareness. So the first
Right.
experience, it may not be what, and because we only have 2 sessions, just thinking of our employees who are going to go through this, it takes dedication to do this, and a lot of practice. And so I don't want to lose any of our participants to say, well, I really didn't feel anything. I didn't experience anything. This is not for me. I'm not going to sit here for 5 minutes and feel my feet, you know. So,
Right.
but when you know it, this is my own personal experience. It takes practice and practice and practice to let your mind go and clear your head, and actually understand what does it mean to feel your feet or feel your body weightless, and there's nothing going on in your brain at all. But to get there, I'm just afraid that we may not have believers here if we only do it a couple times. So we, like you said, we need tools. We need to give our employees tools and information to make them want to come back to the practice.
Absolutely. And, you know, a big emphasis of the work we do at Studio B is embodied practices. And so in our portal, we not only have practices with master mindfulness meditation teachers, but Tai Chi, yoga, both restorative yoga and active movement practices, Qigong. We have an horticulturist that talks about gardening and working with plants and soil. And, you know, what Christine emphasized in the beginning of the talk is that mindfulness is a capacity that we all have to drop in and be present. And that presence doesn't mean that there's a clear mind, you know, always. Sometimes it could be true, but in other moments, the mind could feel distracted or busy or in the past or in future thoughts. And so that's part of like the experience that we'll try to lead you through in the little time that we have together, is to understand that mindful moments are really important to have. And that mindfulness meditation as a practice does require a certain amount of commitment, but that there's many practices and methods and techniques that work. And there's an incredible amount of neuroscience and psychological studies and physiological studies over the last 20 years, especially, that will point to in those practices as we kind of move through it together. But we really think it's important that each of you drop into the portal, take advantage of the experiences that are set up in there for you, both live and recorded offerings, pre-recorded content. There's nothing embedded in the portal that's too advanced for any of you. It's all been cultivated to offer a very supportive experience to beginners. So yeah, we're excited. We're here for you with any questions. Gretchen is a fantastic resource, and you have a direct contact with Christina and I as we move through this together. And hopefully at the end of this and throughout, you could provide some feedback so that we could continue to enhance the experience for everyone.
I don't want to take any more time. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm really grateful for being here. I'm looking forward to working with you guys in 2 weeks, and I'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you. Christine, great job. Thank you very much.
How did you feel, Steve?
It was good. It was great. I think the piece to me was first more of a question, which is that it probably makes sense for a beginner like me to go back and review the video sometime over the course of here as I'm practicing, huh? The extent that, because I'm sure I'll see stuff and experience stuff the second time through that, like watching a movie that I didn't see the first time.
Yes, you mean the recording of this?
The recording of this, yeah.
Absolutely,
Right.
yes. Yeah.
And Elena wants to see herself on video again, so I'm sure she'll watch it as well, even though she's an experienced, she got the original instruction in the Russian vein of the mindfulness, but.
That's not a Russian school at all. I started mine with John Kabat-Zinn. So that was sort of where I started during difficult time in my life many years ago. And it takes time. That's why I'm a little concerned, because I want to give the right tools to our employees if they're really interested. It takes time to do this. It's not, I didn't get it from the first time. That's my own experience. The first couple of times I did it, it didn't do anything for me. I was ready to quit.
Can I mention one more thing? So
Mhm.
I am a big fan and student of John Kabat-Zinn's work, and he was really such a pioneer in the mindfulness movement here in the United States. And his work has really propelled the research of the neuroscience of mindfulness dramatically forward. It's because of his work. But what he teaches in the MBSR model is sitting for twice a day for 45 minutes each session. And what we know now, because of the enormous studies and research that have come out of that work, is that really all it takes is 3 to 5 minutes of formal practice a day to have significant cognitive and neurological changes in the brain. So that has changed things a lot and made these practices much more accessible to just regular people trying to manage a busy life. So I think that'll feel a little more spacious for you and less overwhelming.
Good. I like that.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. We want to make sure that we're being respectful of your time today, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.